My Big Fat Diet Book by Richard Mason. Chapter 1. The Chubby Kid, 1978 to 1990. Being big, fat, overweight, porky, chubby, big-boned is always frowned upon by the normal thin world, isn't it? Probably because there are more thin people than fat people. Well, maybe years ago there was. But since the days of movie stars, soap stars and pop bands, they project a perfect image of being thin and good looking. Okay, so there were a few big stars when I was younger. Alison Moyet, Dawn French, Meat Loaf. But that was about it, to be honest. In the 80s all the pop stars seemed slim and good looking, and I was interested in being a singer from a very young age. I loved listening to music and playing with anything electronic that would make a sound: microphones, tape recorders, keyboards. As I grew up, I was led to believe that being bigger was really wrong. Fat was abnormal and thin was normal. And this has never really changed much. It's even worse nowadays. All the latest celebrity fad diets and surgical and non-surgical procedures they have, we're all pushed into looking our best. But nowadays, if you see someone overweight walking down the street, you automatically think to yourself, "You fat sod, you greedy bugger, fatty fatty boom boom." You say it in your head as you see them as you're driving along. The list goes on. But you don't know why they're big. It could be a medical problem. It could be something to do with their metabolism. But straight away, you think the worst. You think people are overweight because they're greedy. Maybe it is in some cases, but we never really give them the chance. Being big could be down to a number of things I've mentioned. There are people who eat all day and all night, but for a lot of people, it may be just bad food choices, bad timing, portion control, genetics, comfort eating. Could be a manner of things. For me, it was always a mixture of wrong food choices, boredom eating, and a good old mix of comfort eating. Comfort eating. Food is always there when you need it, isn't it? And you know what you're getting. All this with "I hate all exercises" thrown in, all sports, and you start to get bigger. And it snowballs. You seem to just not care anymore. You think, well, I am fat. I may as well just get bigger. Days go by, weeks go by, months go by, and years go by. The same uncontrollable train of weight. The weight train. Is it such a crime to enjoy food? To enjoy eating? Why can't you eat as much as you want and just be healthy? Mother Nature is cruel. From being a toddler to about the age of 8, I was a fairly slim, normal, healthy child. I would do things all the other kids did. I was quite lucky. I was brought up on a farm in a fantastic, beautiful little village, which was good for outdoors and exercise, plenty of fresh air. But along with that, on the downside, there was the fact of the farmhouse cooked food back in the 80s. Everything seemed deep fried or loaded with sugar. There were 6 of us at home, my parents and 3 sisters. My family were all slim. Dad was a bigger build, but not really overweight by that much. So why was I piling on the pounds, aged 8? By the time I was 10 years old, I was 2 or 3 stone overweight. I looked chubby, fat, and it made me unhappy. I was literally the only overweight kid in my year. There were other kids at my school who were overweight, but I was definitely the fattest in my year. This led to bullying. Not nasty bullying. I think kids at a young age don't even know that they are bullying. To my friends, it would just have been a bit of harmless fun saying things to me. I received comments like, you could imagine, all weight related. And at first it didn't bother me. You kind of shrug it off and accept that you're different from everyone else, but when it comes to sport, swimming, football and things like that, you feel miles behind everyone else. I hated sport at primary school. I was always the last to be picked for a team. And a lot of the time I used to get my mum to write a letter so I could just stand on the sidelines watching all the slim kids playing football, while I just looked on feeling sad, but relieved. My love of music was a huge part of my childhood. We lived on a big farm with lots of outbuildings, which I was always getting my father to convert into something music related. He once built me a stage made from potato pallets in the double garage we had. And I used to form bands with my friends and we would sing along to songs from the charts in the 80s. I sometimes used to put on songs and pretend I was performing to an audience. The garage door had some holes in it where you could see through. I once put on the song called Superman by Black Lace. I was doing all the actions and singing along really loud. Just near the end of the song, I looked towards the double doors and I could see 3 pairs of eyes looking back at me. I was mortified. But as I stopped, my mother, father, and one of my sisters all cheered and clapped and said, "Carry on, carry on." I just felt so embarrassed and put another song on. I was an inquisitive kid and always taking things to bits to see how they worked and then could never get them back together. I always liked to be making something or doing something creative, restless hands. If I went with my dad to take his pigeons training, I would have to sit in the car with a bag of crisps and some pop while he spoke to one of his pigeon friends in the lofts. I would just sit in the car and play with the cigarette lighter, warming it up and melting things. I sometimes used to warm it up and press it on the dashboard of the car. My dad would get back in the car and say, "Can you smell burning, son?" I'd say, "No, Dad," and hope he didn't notice the round burn mark on the dashboard. I never had school dinners. I don't know why. I was vegetarian, so it was maybe easier for me to take packed lunch. There were 20 plus kids that took packed lunch as well as me. And my parents used to pack me with what I like: sandwiches, crisps, chocolate bars, with a couple of cans of fizzy pop. This was lunch, and when I got home from school it was usually more crisps, biscuits. Tea was usually something like chips, potatoes, veg, and then more snacks and things like that before bed. In my early years I seemed to lose the proper way of eating. Fruit and vegetables were something that was scarce in my diet. I can remember being about 11 and going to the farm shop some mornings to get something for breakfast. I'd buy 2 bags of crisps, a packet of nuts and an orange, plus some tins of pop. I'd come home and eat everything except the orange. This was my breakfast some weekends. During the week I would have toast or cereal for breakfast. Not all breakfasts were like this one, just some. I remember going swimming when at primary school and feeling like a beached whale. Stretch marks and a saggy gut. I looked like Mr. Blobby in Speedos. As we sat around the pool waiting to go in, the other kids would say things to me, nasty things. "What are them red lines on your belly, Richard?" they would say. I didn't really know what they were, but I knew they were from being overweight. For all the names and embarrassment of being big, it didn't stop me eating. For some reason, I was just getting bigger and bigger as the years went by. Primary school wasn't that bad. There's something quite safe about being at a school in your village where you'd grown up, the teachers you know. Everyone kept saying it will be different when you get to secondary school, and everyone told me to get prepared. When people said this, it sent a bolt of dread through me like lightning. My primary school years seemed to go quite quick, and I didn't think I ate any different to any other kids, but deep down I knew I did. When on school trips, I ate the same as the other kids. I remember going to see pantomimes in Nottingham with the school and eating popcorn and sweets and other things like that on the bus journey there and on the bus journey home. And I thought to myself, well, they're eating all this. Why am I bigger than these kids? Then in the back of my mind, I remembered the secret foods I ate when I was on my own. When I was at primary school, I had a best friend who would come round on a weekend to hang out on the farm. Saturday lunchtimes we would argue over who was going to go to the chip van. Well, I say chip van, it was more of a chip bus. This old couple had converted a bus into a chip shop. They parked it up in the village and sold fish and chips. My friend would usually go and I would get the plates ready in my den on the farm. My den was one of the old barns that had converted. I would get the plates and knives and forks while waiting. My friend would get back with the chips. Sometimes they were undercooked, but to be honest, they tasted good. There was always somewhere to chuck away, but it was a part of my childhood I remember well. My friend scoffed most of his chips, and so did I. I just remember thinking, how come I am fat and he is thin? And then again I remembered, the foods I ate when I was on my own. The summer holidays were free choice as far as food was concerned. My parents were at work and my sisters were the ones who looked after me and my other sister. The farm was a safe place to play and grow up. There was always someone around. During the school holidays, we would help ourselves to whatever food we liked. Sometimes I used to make chips, toast, jacket potatoes loaded with butter and other fillings. Sometimes, if we were lucky, we would bike to the local chip shop in the next village and have a bag of chips or something. I loved this local chip shop. Dad would sometimes take us at night for a bag of chips, just because we could. We would sit in the car, steaming the windows up, eating them while they were hot. Again, cherished childhood memories. Every Friday evening I would go to a town where my dad worked, and we would pick up his wages, and we'd call and see my nana, who would cook us tea. She used to think it was really funny that I didn't eat meat, and she often tried to get me to eat bacon or steak or chicken. I just said, "No thanks, Nana," and I would have whatever else was on offer. Nana usually cooked something like chips and mushy peas. She used to do the chips in the chip pan but with no basket, and she'd get them out with the fish slice. I would have these with peas or beans and a few slices of bread and butter. Sometimes I would have mashed potato with loads of milk and butter, with carrots or mushy peas, again with bread and butter. I would then go into my nana's living room and watch one of the 4 TV channels that we had at the time, eating my tea alone. Holidays away were usually meals in the hotel, set meals. I used to eat fish sometimes when I was younger, but no poultry or red meats from around the age of 8 or 9. I tended to live on all the trimmings, but not the meat. Lunchtimes on holidays were usually sandwiches or a bag of chips, something like that. Sometimes we had a caravan holiday, which was self-catering, which meant trips to the local shop at the caravan park. I loved this. I used to buy crisps, chocolate bars, cans of pop, and eat them straight after breakfast. I think by 11 or 12 years of age I was past caring about my weight. But there was a few times when it used to bother me, mainly when something I classed as a close friend or family member said something to me. This really hurt and made me feel like crap. I knew from an early age I enjoyed my food, which was nothing wrong, but it was the types of food that I liked that was the problem, and the eating patterns I'd got into. On an evening or at weekends, I would sometimes just go and make something in the kitchen. Fried bread, toast, beans on toast. Sometimes I'd just come back with a bowl full of beans and sit and eat them while watching TV. Not because I was hungry. I think it was mainly because I was bored. I suppose this was a regular thing, and if I didn't make it, I would take a trip to the local farm shop. The local farm shop used to sell everything: crisps, peanuts, chocolate bars, and also fruit. I'd come back with plenty of crisps and nuts, some cans of fizzy pop, bring them all home, sit and eat them while watching TV with my family. Sometimes there were the not so nice kids at the bus stop messing about, and I would get abuse from them. Fat comments, fat shaming. It was horrible, but worth it to fetch the snacks. Sometimes my sisters would come with me, and the awful kids didn't say anything if I was with one of my sisters. I really do think the bad habits and wrong food choices and the way I treated food have stuck with me since then. Food has always been there. It's always been a comfort. It's always there when other things weren't. There's something about eating and eating, something that tastes good, that takes your mind off something. It almost gives you a high. Just for a few minutes when you're eating, it's comforting. You know it's bad for you. You know it's addictive. I suppose it's a kind of an addiction, just like alcoholics, drug addicts. Maybe not quite as dangerous, but when you think about it, maybe it is. Heart disease, strokes, cancer, heart problems, diabetes, all related to being overweight. Various people did remind me of this throughout my childhood, but nothing ever seemed to kick in and make me change. I was once at primary school and a girl my age was having a birthday party. Everyone had got their invites and it was literally all my class apart from some girls she'd fell out with. One of my friends said, "Isn't Richard getting an invite?" And to this she replied, "No, my mum said he will eat everything." I didn't know if this was a joke or not, but I didn't get an invite to the party. And then I heard a few days later how everyone had enjoyed it. When you're fat, you can be a bit of an outcast. This probably did hurt me a bit at the time. The funny thing about the whole party incident is the girl's mum was very overweight. Huge, and I mean huge. She was a lot more overweight than I was at the time. Sometimes we did football as a PE lesson on Monday. The teacher would get the football kit out and there was only 2 large tops. The rest were small or a small medium. Now there were 3 fat kids in my school, so one of us was going to miss out every time. It was a struggle to get to the big shirts before the other 2 guys. I remember seeing one of them once in a small top. He looked like a zeppelin in a condom. It was really stretched on him and made him look huge, and I thought to myself, that could be me another week. There was once or twice when I did get a smaller shirt, but I just got on with it. If you did have a smaller shirt, the teacher would sometimes say things to you like, you need to slim. I hated going out as a kid, out for meals or out to a friend's house. I always found it hard to eat in front of others. I think maybe everyone expects you to eat loads and be a pig. To be honest, I didn't eat much in front of others, especially friends. If a rare time I'd go to a friend's house for tea, I'd just sit there eating a piece of bread and very little else, and I would soon make an excuse and leave. I would dread family weddings. It would mean having to have a meal in front of others. I was such a fatty eater. I didn't really like fruit or vegetables. I didn't like salad. I didn't like meat or poultry. I'd survive on crisps and bread and things like that. Somehow, I had limited my own food choices to very little, really. I don't know why and when it started, but something was wrong with my eating patterns. I had very weird food tastes as a kid. Sometimes on a Sunday, we would go over to my auntie's for tea. She would put on a buffet spread. Salad sandwiches, crisps and biscuits, things like that. I'd just have bread and crisps and maybe a biscuit. Odd times I would mix food together. I'd put a chocolate bar in a piece of bread and eat it, or take a piece of lettuce and start covering it in ice cream and then eat it. I remember once having baked beans and a couple of Kit Kats and dipping them in the beans. Salad stuff to me was awful. Tomatoes looked soggy. Cucumbers seemed to have a strong taste. Lettuce seemed pointless. I did like some fresh veg though. Some summers, me and my sisters and some friends would go and sit in the fresh pea fields, watching the pea harvesters at work, eating lots and lots of fresh peas, bringing some home for Mum to freeze. They tasted so good fresh out of the pod, but even though they are fresh and healthy, I never knew when to stop eating them and would usually make myself ill on them. I seemed to like to binge on food, and this was something that only got worse as my childhood years went by. Late night binges, frying things at night, crisps and nuts for breakfast instead of healthy normal breakfast. I had an obsession with food and it got out of control quite a lot of the time. Some days I'd eaten so much that I felt physically sick, physically ill. Sometimes I would eat a load of crisps and nuts throughout the day with a load of other crap, and it had made me feel ill by night time. Sometimes at a weekend we would have a party to go to, and I would look forward to it all day, but by the night time I felt ill because of all the food I'd stuffed in my face. I'd lay on my bed feeling awful, stomachache and the runs. How could I go out now, I'd think to myself as I lay there holding my young bloated belly, praying that the pain and sickness would go. Most times it did. This happened quite a lot through my younger years. I never learned from my mistakes and kept doing it over and over. Looking back, my weight was an illness. Back then there wasn't so many eating disorders, especially for being overweight. If you were overweight, you were just plain fat, just plain greedy, and people told you so. None of this, it could be an eating disorder, or it's their thyroid, or their big bone, it's their metabolism. You were just plain fat. As I got to my early teens, I somehow got a little bit more control over my eating habits. Things managed to sort themselves out a little bit. I was still a chubby kid, but not as big as I could have been. My childhood was a fairly happy childhood, and I did everything all the other kids did, except for sport. I did enjoy life, and I enjoyed living on the farm. It soon became time to leave primary school and start big school. Yikes. Could secondary school be any worse than primary school? You would like to think not, wouldn't you? I suppose I was just going to find out very soon. End of chapter 1.